Okay, I want to talk about these videos that I have done. It is a former prosecutor that I'm sure most people are probably aware of that was investigating the Bidens, but he wasn't just investigating Bidens. It wasn't, from what I have heard from his complete presentation, was an attack on the Democrats or the Biden family. What it was people came to him and said, hey, there's a problem. We believe there's a theft of Ukrainian money via this tariff scheme that the former Ukrainian president and Biden was creating. And it wasn't like, this isn't like in any way defending Russia, because as I'm going to point out here in just a minute or so, Russia is just as much as guilty in this scheme as the rest of them. So this isn't, Russia versus US versus Ukraine. This is just an investigation that was initiated by a man who's never had any kind of scandal in his career. He was just, he'd been in his career for some time. And what happened was a US senator, allegedly assigned by Biden, but the documents from the senator, they decide, well, we, the United States, are going to go over there in Ukraine, and we're going to assist in this reform of prosecutors, and we're going to deal with this corruption over there. Okay, as if Ukraine could not do that themselves. So what they did, and this man presents these banana trade company that has no experience whatsoever to create a symmetric test to test prosecutors. And if they don't pass the test, then they cannot remain in office, right? This was their effort to so-called reform prosecutors. But this prosecutor's like, well, before I take this test, I'm going to research this company. Now, keep in mind, this is a prosecutor, and all the documents, the bank records, the recordings between Biden and the former Ukrainian president, all of the records, all of the witness testimony that were put under protection for whistleblowers, that give testimony. They do interviews in these videos. You can hear the people that was literally involved in the scheme firsthand in the transactions and transferring the monies. And this person right here is not somebody, well, actually this person sitting next to him, I'll show in a minute, is not somebody who is just going around and investigating rumors. This is a person who is in authority to obtain records. Kind of like the American FBI can go in and they can seize bank records. They can go in and they can demand a bank produce bank records. Now, whether or not America can go over and demand the same thing from the banks, and say, hey, give us those records because we want to validate whether or not this prosecutor had actual, real records from the bank, unless you go to a court and do that. But this is a person here who has the authority to obtain records and has the authority to work with witnesses, okay? And that's what he presented. He presented documents, bank records, recorded phone calls, and that's what he presents after he was, fired. And let me tell you, he wasn't fired because the documents he presented were fake. He was fired because he refused to take a test created by some students of some bogus company that had literally no expertise or training to create and design a symmetrics test for prosecutors. It was such a joke and such a bogus thing that the United Senator and these officials from the U.S. set up to help allegedly help fight corruption. They're going to create this test that will have better prosecutors in office. And it was just junk. So anyways, but the whole thing that this was about is really connected to the war. And it's not about Russia versus US versus Ukraine. That's not what I'm presenting. I want to show you what Putin says in regards to this this Donbass area. When he started this, it was really a battle for those areas. Okay, he says, well, those people wanted to be Russian. I looked at the polls. I did and researched the polls. They were not interested in being Russian in the beginning until the infiltrators came in, until the propaganda started kicking in. The poll was 25% of them were slightly interested. But at any rate, I can show the link to those polls that were done back then. And then it increased, and then more and more, and then it just became a big mess. But at any rate, that Donbass region that Putin was so interested in was about the coal and the gas. And so in February 21st, okay, I'm going to pause this. This is the February 21st speech that Putin gave explaining why he went in to Ukraine. Now, I want you to note right here, he's not saying, oh, they were robbing the Ukrainians like this other prosecutor. That was his whole investigation. It didn't matter who the parties were involved. That wasn't his agenda. His agenda was that the Ukrainians were being robbed, that they imposed 75% increase in tariffs. So they were, on utilities and this gas, and it was about the coal and the gas. Okay. But very clearly note here, he doesn't say they were robbing the Ukrainians. He wants the gas. It's not like he's trying to protect the Ukrainians from the Biden family stealing money from the Ukrainians. No, he wants the gas. He wants it. And then he says earlier in this speech, I'm gonna pause it. Okay. So he's talking about how Donbass and parts of Ukraine became the modern day Ukraine. So basically, he wants Donbass. He wants these regions that have these resources. Wars are always about the resources. And I'm not saying that it's wrong to go to war and protect the resources, to keep people who are, the KYIV in power, that are very capable of doing genocidal things like this man and like previous leaders like in the Middle East. That, at any rate, I don't get off on that tangent, but it's all about the resources. Okay. So he talked about how, these areas were given over by Lenin, and he wants these areas back because of the gas. He doesn't care the Ukrainians are being robbed, but he does say in another interview that, there's corruption and there's theft. Yes, there is theft going on. Yeah, there is. Okay. So this is the power of resources and greed, basically. It doesn't matter that, yes, Biden's family is involved in, those companies over there and the coal from those regions that were fueling that. But, Putin's just as much as involved. So I'm going to pause it again. See, in the beginning of his speech, he talks about Ukraine was, those are our comrades. He talks very lovingly about the Ukrainians. This is February 21st, before he goes in and starts genociding the people that he speaks. So, okay, here it is right here. I want to pause right there. When he said originally Russia was Christian, this right here is another issue why he can't stand it, that a Jewish president is now running Ukraine. He can't stand it. He can't stand it. And it's just like he said. Now he talks about in other parts of his speech how, they're like liberal and they're very diverse, but in reality, that's a part of it. And that's why he uses that Nazi speech to death. Okay. Literally they're all Nazis because he's the Nazi in form. And he can't stand it that basically this vice president of America is getting rich off of this coal in this area. But he's in on it though. Here, watch closely. Okay. So he talks about the Donbass region that he infiltrated to create havoc there. Okay. And create dissension. Yes, he did that. Okay. And the authorities that were in power there's a documentary that showed how they went in there and they were covering up the people that had been planted there. They were doing the referendums. The authorities there they knew where they were and didn't try to stop them. But there's a documentary you can watch about that. But basically, the bottom line is he wants control. Those people are not independent. They're Russian Federation. So he has control. Who's getting rich off the money now? Him. That's who. So he has threatened to do nuclear war if anybody tries to stop him. But he loves the Ukrainians, right? No, he doesn't love the Ukrainians. He went in there because of the resources and because he can't stand a Jewish president is running the country and because he wants control of the resources. And he basically talks very lovingly about Ukrainians first of his speech. And then you see what he just said? I'm going to pause this right here. Then he says, well, their U.S. missile defense system is not able to withstand us. It's like it's a joke. He said, I am the nuclear powerful one. But he's trying to make up excuses about how they're in any way threatening him. But it's a joke, because if he was feeling threatened, why would he make nuclear threats? If he was really concerned that people are going to attack him, why would he make nuclear threats? That would be like the very reason that you would go after somebody if they're being threatened with nukes. You know what I'm saying? It's about the gas. And so here he's talking about how he's fixed to do bloodshed on Ukrainians, the Ukrainians that he loves so much, because he wants to give them a choice to be Russian or not, all of them. But yet he threatened them with bloodshed. And here he threatens consequences like you've never seen before, right here. Okay? And let there be no mistake on what he meant by this, because later he does use the words of nuclear threat, but as you have never seen in your entire history, okay, for anybody that tries to intervene, okay. And the U.S., the worst that we've ever had is, basically like the 9/11, the attack, on Pearl Harbor, where they took down 20 planes, like 200 ships, and basically threatening with nuclear war if you dare try to stop him. But he's about the love of Ukrainians. It's about the resources and about his empire having these things again that they've had before. And Biden going over there and getting involved with that. And I'm not saying Biden's to blame. I'm just saying, I'm going to go back. I'm going to pause this. This guy, when they fired him, and you listen to all the recordings of Biden talking about, yeah, we got him fired, so it's all better now. You didn't get rid of the documents that this man legally obtained of bank records. Hold on. He has the records. He has legal records that nobody in Ukraine in the government said, hey, these records are not valid. These are fake documents. Nobody in the Ukraine government authority did that, because he legally obtained it with his position. So you can say, well, unless I see it through a United States federal court where we subpoena these records, I'm not going to accept these. But you cannot say that these documents and these bank records and the evidence and these witness testimonies is not real. You can't say that. This is the person who was involved in the scheme, or this money was being funneled about the coal and the gas and those companies over there that fed to the, he specifically said there was transactions, okay, evading tax and just the whole scandal. And this is one of the two witnesses that this prosecutor was protecting, and he is an official whistleblower. There was a criminal investigation. There was 2 criminal investigations, but they were closed because the prosecutor was fired. Not because the documents weren't valid, not because they didn't have evidence, but because he refused to take a test that some U.S. senator hired a bogus company to, allegedly this ridiculous, and he shows the information about this company, a banana trade company. They had no experience to create a Symmetrics. So I have 3 videos. This whole thing is about an hour long, and I did 3 different videos, and you can see, all the documents yourself. But I'm just saying that, in combining the comments from Putin, and he doesn't care about the Ukrainians. He didn't go in there to rescue them. He's just using that as a front. He just can't stand it that this that there's people getting rich off of these resources. And this shows, it shows the connection to Russia and the Ukrainian former president and the whole thing. And again, the guy that's sitting next to him is the prosecutor. It was never debunked. The documents and the evidence, this guy right here, he's the prosecutor that legally obtained the bank records, legally obtained all the documents. He has the letters from the United States senator who was allegedly doing a reform of prosecutors to try to oust the guys who's actually literally exposing corruption in the guise that they're fighting corruption. They're going to reform against corruption. And again, I'm just saying, because I don't want anybody to think in any way that this is really between Biden and Russia. It's really just the fact that this should be investigated. And what's so irritating is that the media blackwashed it, or whitewashed, or whatever it is, it was a blackout. So since I uploaded this on March 20th, all of a sudden, you've got other people all of a sudden since like March 24th are talking about these documents again. Oh yeah, well, I guess there was some computer, but they're saying, well, unless we see the documents, through a subpoena, as if the documents are, why don't they contact this guy and get the documents? There isn't a left and right media, in my opinion. Because why is the media not contacting this guy here? He has the documents. When he was in office, he legally obtained the documents. Now, granted, the United States, if they're going to sue Biden, they may, I don't know if legally the United States can prosecute him without the United States being able to subpoena those banks over there. Okay, to get any records from over there, if they are able to reach over internationally and demand that they put out those records, okay? Whether the FBI can do that or not, I don't know. But the media, if any media is saying that, because this guy was fired, it's bunk, that's wrong. It doesn't matter if he was fired. If it doesn't matter if a new prosecutor takes on the case and, just steps in and takes all the evidence that this guy obtained and then he's fired. It doesn't matter if they close the case. It doesn't mean these documents aren't valid. It doesn't mean that it can't be raised. And so if anybody says, well, the prosecutor was fired, it doesn't matter. And if any media says, well, we don't have the records, well, that's because they're not trying to get them from this guy. And it's not valid news when they're hiding things. And so that's all I want to present, is that this is something that is still open, should be allowed to be discussed, and nobody should be saying that these documents are not available, because if they are, mark the person saying it, because they are not telling the truth. That's all.